Yeah, so just briefly about myself. My name is Timothy Ruff. I'm a general partner in Digital Trust Ventures. It's a venture studio in Salt Lake City, Utah, in the U.S. And prior to this, I was the CEO and co-founder of a company called Credential Master, which we sold after only about 18 months to Salesforce. And prior to that, I left Evernym. If you've heard of Evernym, I was a co-founder of Evernym, and we sold that company in December to Avast. And while I was at Evernym, you've probably heard of Sovereign. So I am a co-inventor of Sovereign and the issue, hold, verify model that was pioneered there prior to Sovereign. All right. I'm going to do a pretty quick presentation here. I'm going to do a flyby of what's happening around the world in SSI. It is not comprehensive, but it's got probably more than you thought was happening. There's just too much happening to get it all. So I tried to get the most important things, and please put something in the chat if there's something important that I have missed out. Now, the first thing I want to do is define what I mean by SSI, because there's a lot of things that pretend to be SSI or look like SSI or claim to be SSI that really are not. So here's how I define it. Self-sovereign identity, or SSI, it's the same as decentralized identity. It follows the issue, hold, verify model. It respects holder autonomy. If the holder does not have autonomy, it's not SSI. It's a captive program and that or a product. It uses interoperable protocols instead of captive platforms. It's a very big principle, and there's no vendor lock-in. You should be able to move your credentials from wallet to wallet. You should be able to fire one provider and switch to another and not lose things that you've got. Now, SSI isn't mature enough to do all of those things yet. So even those companies that are trying to do those sincerely still haven't proven tremendous interoperability, but that's very different from companies and products and initiatives that aren't even trying to do that. So that's what I took a look at around the world. And also, I wanted to share a definition of what I believe is the superpower of SSI boiled down into a single sentence. And that is data carried by people, organizations, and things that can be authenticated outside the trust domain where it originated. There is no other technology that can do this thing. Now, there's two really, really important concepts in that sentence. The first one is authenticating a piece of data outside the trust domain where it originated. The second is that it can be carried by people, organizations, or things. Those two things together exclude every other existing data or identity technology and make this completely unique to SSI. So now let's get into it. Now that you know how I'm kind of filtering things as I look at projects around the world. And let's talk about where things are happening. And I'll go pretty quickly. And I'm not watching the chat right now. So if there's something important that we need to stop on, I'm fine being interrupted because my presentation is not going to be too long. But I would need someone to come off of mute and interrupt me. So let's start with the European Union. A lot is happening in the EU. There's been a recent declaration on European digital rights and principles. It doesn't name SSI specifically, but a lot of other things do. The EU Identity Wallet Initiative, which is kind of linked to the EIDAS 2.0 revision that's coming out. Very, very big deal. This is probably the biggest thing in the world that's happening. That's why I'm putting this first, that all 27 EU states will be mandated to provide a European identity wallet to their citizens. And that's a lot of countries and a lot of people. They're also talking about mandating that big tech and finance and basic services will have to accept it for authenticating users. A lot of the thinking in EIDAS is not SSI yet. It's still kind of DNS X509 certificate thinking. So that's not wonderful, but at least there's a lot of the right thinking in place and the discussions are happening. It does follow the issue, hold, verify model, which DNS and X509 does not work very well with. So as long as it follows the issue, hold, verify model, and they focus on having an interoperable wallet, I think things will be fine. They are on a path to certify every potential wallet that might hold credentials, which is problematic. I would compare that to certifying every backpack wallet or briefcase that might have to carry a passport. Instead, you just need to be able to certify the passport. It needs to be what's called end verifiable. There are other issues like verifying the verifier and things like that, but those can be overcome without having to try to certify every wallet. And right now, unfortunately, every proposal on the table involves certifying every single wallet, and that would mean every code update. And it's a fool's errand, but unfortunately, no one has a way around that. There are ways around it, but they're not on the table yet. Hopefully, we can rectify that. The European SSI framework was formed by EBSI. This is it's kind of a joint thing. It kind of predates the EIDAS 2.0 or the Identity Wallet Initiative, and it's proceeding regardless of what happens with the EIDAS. And I think those will merge. I think those will merge also with the CEN standards. It's an ad hoc group for European digital identity wallets. Several different efforts. I believe that they will converge in time, and the EU is collaborating with Canada for interoperability. And by the way, this information is not comprehensive. There's a lot more to understand. These are just some points that interested me about what's happening. I want to dive in specifically to a few countries. Germany, many projects, not all of them are aligned yet. Certainly ID Union, that's a nationwide SSI network. It's a public-private consortium with some of the biggest companies in the world. It's got 3 years funding, and it will be interoperable with that future EU wallet. The Digital Identities Ecosystems Project, it's initiated by Angela Merkel in cooperation with Spain. It's just kind of another thing that's moving forward at the same time. The overall Digital Identities Project, same thing, another project moving forward. And all of that on top of the EIDAS 2.0 and ESIF, so just a lot of things moving forward in Germany. Netherlands, the Dutch Trust Network. It is a Dutch SSI network that will plan to be part of the other European SSI ecosystems. There's several organizations that are building SSI wallet infrastructure, including, Rabobank, who's a big global bank. And Netherlands also is an early adopter of the ESIF project through EBSI. And they have a lab, their SSI ecosystem. They're integrating with, interoperating with a number of SSI solutions, just a whole lot of activity in the Netherlands. Oh, there's a couple more here. Techruption event, a lot of use cases involving medicine, granting, representation, banking, health sector, and they are coordinating with neighboring countries. Finland, a lot going in Finland. FindiNet, which is, did someone say something? Okay, thought I heard something. This is, once again, a ledger for the country of Finland. They also have a joint agreement with Germany to explore and drive the development of solutions based on SSI and to promote the related European legislation. So I love seeing these cooperations and collaborations between the countries, even separate from what's going on at the EU level. They're establishing public-private ecosystems to innovate around wallets. They also have the DVV, which is leading development of government-maintained national identity wallet, once again, focus on wallets. Austria, Italy, and Spain. So in Austria, they have an EBSI node there, and they're focused on the diploma use case with a couple of universities, and Marcus Sabadello from Danube Tech. Italy, public organizations are driving IBSI, which is an Italian layer 1 network that also leverages the EBSI stack. Fintechs are creating consortia around KYC sharing, and InfoCert the largest certificate authority in Europe, has created a product and company called DISME, and they've created an ecosystem around zero trust authentication and a bunch of other very cool use cases. In Spain, we of course have a Austria national blockchain, and most of the big companies are members, and that includes Austria ID that does work with ID wallets. And they are going to require major entities, including banks, to accept that ID. Korea, a lot of pilots happening, a lot of wonderful use cases, digital ID, civil service card, driver's license, certificates, and I love this last one, disability, alien, and youth registration cards. Those are unique. At least the youth registration card, I believe that's the only one that I've heard of in the world. And they have a smart city initiative on Jeju Island. I don't know how to say that properly. In Japan, I wasn't able to learn more, but apparently there is a COVID-19 vaccination certificate initiative. Couldn't find any details on it, but it did look like it was happening. In Singapore, there's a very active player in the SSI industry called Affinity, who I believe is presenting here at this event. They've got a number of really cool projects around the world. One in Uganda dealing with micro health insurance for underprivileged women. One in India for job placement. That one's called Good Worker. India, financing for blue collar workers. Singapore with a digital health wallet. In China, I need to move my little toolbar, it's getting in my way, so I can't see the bottom. There we go. China with cross-border trade identity. Africa, Sierra Leone, the Kiva protocol there is being used for financial inclusion, KYC, and alternative credit history. Also, iRespond, a US company, a nonprofit company that has some really cool biometrics-based products around the world, is in Sierra Leone with an HPV testing project that uses SSI. In Rwanda, they have Farmer Connect, which is going about credit for farmers using SSI principles. In South Africa, there's a few things happening. They've got SSI for finance through the South African Financial Blockchain Consortium, and YOMA with schools credentials for youth. I'm pretty sure there's more going on with South Africa than that. In Philippines, Thailand, and Myanmar, I've got Zeta, who's got a program for vaccination records throughout the region. Thailand has another iRespond project for human rights abuses and attacking or fighting human rights abuses in the fishing industry, plus also refugee ID, and Zeta for vaccination records. Also in Myanmar also has a iRespond project for HIV testing, and Zeta for vaccination records. Australia, New Zealand. Australia has some really cool things happening around the country. In New South Wales, they are publicly promoting digital government and significantly invested into verifiable credentials, which of course, have to be held in a wallet, SSI. And they're pushing to use mobile driver's license for just about everything, which is wonderful. Victoria, also moving forward, a little bit further behind, but New South Wales is the most populous province there in Australia. New Zealand, of course, Matter, one of the bigger players in the SSI industry, is working hard on the digital health pass, COVID credentials, and digitally enhanced paper to be more inclusive, of course, with people who don't have the digital devices. Canada, there's a ton going on in Canada. BC Gov, they're building wallet and infrastructure. They're participating in the Pan-Canadian Verifiable Data Registry and the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework as well. And they're working on business-to-business verifiable credentials with sustainable mining practices. Ontario is also aligned with British Columbia, supporting the same initiative. Quebec, they've created a cybersecurity minister and modernized their data protection law and collaborating with the other provinces. Saskatchewan is conducting SSI proof of concepts this year and aligned with other provinces. And Alberta is launching the National Digital Trust proof of concept and also aligned with the National Trust Framework. United States, Department of Homeland Security, working on things with the immigrant work status and a few other use cases, including the Customs and Border Patrol. I guess that's where the immigrant situation is. Department of Education has come out with something called the T3 network and the lifelong learner record. that has some of the most prestigious institutions, educational institutions in the United States that are deeply involved with that at a high level. New York has something called the Excelsior Pass that's statewide for vaccination records and COVID-19. The credit union industry has come out with something called Member Pass for authenticating credit union members when they call in, walk in, or log in. And there's some major players that a lot of people have heard of around the world that are entering the space: Microsoft, IBM, Salesforce, and Square, which is now called Block, and among many others that are placing bets in the space. Globally, there's a number of things happening around the world. One of the most exciting to me is GLIFE. GLIFE is the Global Legal Entity Identifier Foundation. They were formed by the G20 in 2014 after the financial collapse, originally focused on financial institutions, but now any organization in the world can get what's called an LEI, a Legal Entity Identifier. They've so far issued 1.7 million of them. They're mandatory in most countries for financial institutions. And now they're introducing the VLEI, which makes an LEI cryptographically verifiable when presented. It uses verifiable credentials and the carry protocol. But most importantly, what a VLEI does is it ties a human to an organization, so that when a human presents themselves in a digital environment, they can prove that they are representing and have authority from the organization that they have been given authority from. They can prove it verifiably. Very exciting use case, and it's beginning to roll out pilots around the world. IATA Travel Pass, of course, has been with us now for almost a couple of years. I guess maybe a year and a half or so, for helping for health proof when you travel. The World Economic Forum has been really making nice progress on the Known Traveler ID, I think in partnership with Accenture. They also are the platform for good digital identity, setting some standards for what that means to the world so that we don't get off on the wrong track. And just a few days ago, a open source project called Verite, I think that's how you say it, was announced by some of the biggest companies in all of the blockchain and crypto space: Coinbase, Consensus, Circle, Block, Center, MetaMask, and I think a dozen more. And it's a completely open source project. It's all based on verifiable credentials and SSI principles, and it's fully open source. So it's wonderful to see that progressing. So that's a quick flyby. I know it's not comprehensive. You probably each have several things in mind that I didn't cover. So what I would like to do is kind of share my opinion of the status of SSI, and it's a good news, bad news kind of thing. And so I like to start with bad news because I always like to end on a good note. So bad news first of the status of SSI. There's a lot of fake SSI. There's a lot of projects that either think they are SSI and they're just simply not, or they are deliberately manipulating it. And there's also a number of solid efforts that are being corrupted into things that end up being centrally controlled. If it respects the autonomy of the holder, and you can fire a provider and switch to another, those are the two big signs of whether something is SSI or not. And too often they say they are, and they're really not. And we have to be vigilant to make sure that they are not adopted in a serious way. The opponents of SSI are becoming more vocal and more aggressive, and that's because SSI is gaining momentum everywhere, and people are talking about it and publishing things about it. And sometimes we don't have all the answers, and so cybersecurity experts will come in and they will attack things. And sometimes they're right, and we need to fix things that we haven't addressed. But regardless, the battle is only intensifying, and it should be healthy, actually, to answer those concerns. Another one that's near and dear to my heart is there's few solid business models and very little in production so far. There are a couple that are solid business models, but there's a whole lot of use cases that people talk about that they haven't been able to figure out how to make a viable business out of. And there's consequently very little in production, probably a few 100,000, credentials in the world that are actually in production, if I were to just guess. There's also risk of SSI of show me your papers. And, you know, show me your papers is of World War II Germany, kind of a scary idea that people in identity are always wary of, and making sure that we don't fall into a trap where this is possible. And with SSI, it is possible when people are carrying a lot of information, including sensitive information, and they can present that at any time, then there's a risk of a verifier asking for more than they should. And so proper SSI policy has to accompany the technology. It can't be just a technology play. We also have way too many DID methods, 115 and counting, and each of them have their own security model and some of them different standards. That is an interoperability nightmare, and we've got a problem there. There's also many blockchains, and I'm not aware of any of them being directly interoperable just yet. And key management is mostly unaddressed. We still don't know how to enable one credential issued on one blockchain in one country to be verifiable in another, how the discovery is going to happen, and how my 85-year-old mother is going to manage her private keys, especially if she has a lot of them, without anyone explaining to her what a public key is, or private key, excuse me, or managing either one. She's got to manage both public and private keys. So that's the bad. Let's talk about the good. The good is the issue, hold, verify model is taking off, and it's breathtaking to see the momentum. And what appears to be happening is once people catch the vision of self-sovereign identity and what it means for people to carry around their credentials of whatever kind and be able to choose what they want to present and what they don't, the privacy capabilities that are possible, and just the flexibility, the efficiency and everything. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And people are falling in love with the model. So even if they're not aligned with the tech yet, or they don't see it, how it all comes together, the language and the model of being able to give, I like to say, give people their stuff. That's issue, hold, verify. Give people their stuff so they can carry it around and decide what they want to present to whomever they want to present it to. That model is contagious. Also, policy and governance frameworks are advancing, and they are respecting personal autonomy and privacy. We're seeing just a beautiful example in Canada with the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework that Tim Boma has put together. It's amazing work. And those are the kinds of things that have to advance. The policy has to advance as fast or faster than the technology, so we do things the right way. It's also encouraging to see some non-SSI things get shot down. So in the US, the IRS recently announced a partnership with a private company called ID.me, and it was reversed, I think, in less than 2 weeks. The just firestorm of criticism. And they said, all right, and they backed away. And that's not necessarily a pro-SSI thing, but it is a pro-privacy thing. It is a pro-autonomy thing. It is a don't lock us into a particular vendor thing. All of the principles that we value and embrace in SSI were the motivations behind shooting down that partnership that the IRS had. In Switzerland, they had a non-SSI ID system that was recently proposed, and it was shot down. And now they are revisiting. They still need a digital identity solution, and now they're looking at SSI things. And it was great to see that it was voted down. And we're seeing serious movement at the highest levels of a number of governments around the world. This is not just a laboratory project like it was 5 years ago. It is serious discussion with smart people and a lot of opposition, which is a sign of growth. But it's great to see even government jumping in and embracing some of these principles. And we even have some standards converging. We see, for one example, trust over IP and carry coming together to figure out how those protocols can interoperate. And just generally interoperability is progressing. For example, with the Department of Homeland Security, they've been doing some really cool interopathons, or I can't remember what they call it. There's a word they use where a couple of vendors get together and demonstrate interoperability. It's not in the wild yet, but it's nice to see that the conversation is progressing. So in conclusion, my conclusion is simple. Now that SSI is possible, it is inevitable. And I first said this 5 years ago. Because it was maybe a tenet of faith that I believed that this kind of thing would be inevitable. And once people saw it and understood what it was, now it's inevitable for a different reason. It simply has too much momentum. It just can't be stopped. It will just keep trucking on. Very, very exciting to see. So with that, I am done. And I imagine a lot of you saw my slides separately ahead of me presenting them. So I'm going to stop sharing and open up for any Q&A, if there is any. You're welcome, Mr. Timbuma. You've done an amazing job. You deserve a shout out. What they've done with the trust framework in Canada is awesome. And I think a model for the rest of the world.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Timothy. I wanted to be polite and wait for my hand up to be seen. Great presentation, thank you. It struck me as you explained your background and what you are doing now, that you and your comment on the business models, if you like, for looking for the kind of economic sense, that you are front and center of thinking about what to invest in and what kind of makes sense. Do you need to have deep pockets and a long patience for this? Is that the way you're looking at the thing? It's a multi-year investment for you?
You want me to wait for the translation, or should I go ahead and answer? Oh. Okay, you're very fast then. Okay. I believe that investing in SSI right now is a lot like investing in the internet around 2001. The internet was very messy and no one really knew what to do with it prior to that. And there was the dot-com bubble was burst. But then what happened is you saw some companies take the technology and apply it to very specific problems. That is the opportunity to invest in right now. Now, if I had to do Evernym, which we just sold in December, started it in 2012, sold it near the end of 2021. If I had to do it over again, I would have taken Evernym and focused it on a particular vertical, a particular industry, a particular problem. I wouldn't have left it as a general platform for any kind of credential in any industry for any product. That, hindsight is 2020. And so that is what I am doing now. Now that we sold that company, the companies that I am investing now and that I'm advising and helping are taking SSI technology and applying it to a very specific problem. I'll give you one example. There's a company I'm very excited about that I'm investing in and advising called Provenant. And it deals with, it's in the telecom industry, and it's taking this technology and solving robocalls and spam. We all get too many robocalls and spam and fake messages, and the carrier networks have a huge problem with just too much traffic. They have a ton of bad traffic and a ton of fraud. It's just out of control. And this technology that we're working on with SSI can actually solve that problem. And that's what I'm doing with a couple of other things. Take the technology, apply it to a specific thing. So if you're going to invest, that's a great place to invest. Now, do people need general tools to do general things everywhere? Yes, those are still needed. Evernym still has a business, so does everybody else doing those things. But if you're an investor and you want the biggest return, and you want to be if you want to invest in, the Amazon type of opportunity, then you need to pick a company, I think, that's my opinion, that is focused on a particular vertical rather than horizontal.
Cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.